All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to bring you our Fall 2023 preview event hosted by Booklist. You're going to hear about some great new books and have live special guests Christina Wyman, Rey Terciero, also known as Rex Ogle, and Monica and Magaña. We're just going to introduce ourselves from the S&L side. So my name is Elise Villalobos. I'm the Associate Marketing Manager on the School and Library team.
I am Mary Van Aken. I'm the Director of School and Library Marketing at Macmillan Children's.
And I'm Alex Quill. I am the Senior Marketing Manager on the School and Library team, and this is my first preview with the team, so I'm so thrilled to be here with you all.
Excellent. Alex is going to drop a link in the chat with our full title list that we're discussing today. We're excited to give you an overview of our Fall 23 list, including so many great picture books, chapter books, middle grade, and young adult titles from our imprints, which include Feiwel and Friends for our Straus Giroux books for young readers, Henry Holt books for young readers, First Second, Roaringburg Press, Neon Squid, and Odd Dot. As you may have heard, we are also very excited to have a few special guests live with us later in the event. And we will be talking about middle grade debut Jawbreaker, and the laugh out loud middle grade adventure Doña Quixote, Rise of the Night. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. In the chat, you'll see a link for a full list of titles we're discussing today. This link was included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download it, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, click on the link located there. You can also download the title list by copying the URL on this screen into your web browser in the digital review copy column for picture books and graphic novels. You can click through to read a digital review copy on issue. Please do not share these links as they are to be used for review purposes only. In the digital copy review copy column for middle grade and young adult titles, you'll find a link to request the book on NetGalley. As we only have 60 minutes to present, this is not our full list, but you can subscribe to our MacKids School and Library e-newsletter and follow us on MacKids Twitter at MacKidsSL to keep up to speed with all of our new upcoming releases. If you are live tweeting today, please use #MacKidsPreview.
And now for some technical details. Links to today's slide presentation and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You can also download the materials by copying the URL on this screen into your web browser. If you have any trouble, please contact Booklist at webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of the screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click this Q&A button and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions during the event. Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar. From there, you can select show or hide subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting subtitle settings. Today's event will be recorded and the recording will be shared with you after the event. Finally, we expect all participants to maintain an atmosphere of respect and fairness. Anyone who violates this standard of behavior, including engaging in any form of harassment, may, at the discretion of the organizers, be immediately removed. And now, with that, I am really excited to introduce our first special guests to kick off this fall preview. Joy Peskin and Christina Wyman, please join me on screen. As Executive Editorial Director of Farrar Straus Giroux Books for Young Readers and Division Vice President of Macmillan Children's Publishing Group, Joy Peskin manages a department of 6 incredible editors and edits a range of books for children and teenagers. She has mentored and tutored children in New York City and New Jersey since 1997, and she is now a court-appointed special advocate within the foster care system in Essex County, New Jersey. Christina Wyman is a teacher and writer living in Michigan with her husband and silly rescue cat named Alfred, not to mention the raccoons, owls, and hummingbirds that occupy a tree outside their bedroom window. She grew up in a tiny apartment with her family in Brooklyn, and where she dreamed of becoming a writer. Jawbreaker is her debut novel, and we could not be more proud to be publishing your debut. Welcome, Christina. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And I know Christina and I both have additions to the families recently. We each just got a new kitten. So our bios are freshly updated. Christina, it's so great to be here to talk with you about Jawbreaker today in front of this wonderful audience. And there's so much to kind of unpack here that I thought folks might be interested in, because we have kind of an unusual backstory of how we came to be working together. We met through your essay in Washington Post called "I Am Insecure About My Face. For Me, Masks Are Liberating." And that ran early on in the pandemic. Can you tell folks a little bit about that essay, what led you to write it, and what you hope might come out of it?
Yeah. So I took a wonderful essay writing class that really emphasized the importance of being vulnerable when writing in the personal essay genre, if the writer's goal is to be published. And I'd had a really hard time getting my personal essays published to that point. And I began to understand that it was because my writing really wasn't going that deep. So on a whim, I began writing a short piece about something that had bothered me my entire life, which is my craniofacial anomaly. So the structure of my jaws was such that I required surgery to put them into alignment, which was something that I didn't pursue until my third round of braces, 2 of which I experienced as an adult. So my teeth and jaws have presented this lifelong struggle, both structurally, but also with self-esteem and body dysmorphia to some extent. So I wrote this piece about how wearing a mask during the pandemic actually made me feel better about my face because the mask allowed me to hide. So I didn't have any expectations for this piece. And if I expected anything, it was that it wasn't going to be published because nothing else I'd written had been published. And even my first 5 attempts to get that piece published had failed. So all writers hope that their work is going to be picked up. And my only hope was that someone somewhere was going to give my essay a stage. And that was the most I'd hoped for at that time. And then finally, after about 6 weeks, the Washington Post picked it up. And that's how we met.
Thank you. I have to say, I didn't know the whole backstory. Sometimes when I ask a question like that, I kind of do, but I didn't know all of that about the struggle to get it published. And the essay really resonated with me because I also have a craniofacial anomaly. I was born with cleft lip and I had 2 surgeries and 15 years of orthodonture. So like Christina, I also had a journey about that. And I also liked wearing a mask for the very same reason. And I thought, oh my gosh, this headline really caught my attention. And I read the piece and I loved it. And then I was able to reach out to Christina and ask her if she had ever thought about writing either a memoir or fiction for middle graders about this issue, because I think Christina and I can speak for you here, but you tell me if I can't. I think certainly braces have been covered before and are kind of a rite of passage for middle graders, but sometimes people go through something that's more severe, or that feels more severe to them. And I loved the idea that Christina could maybe address that. And so lucky for me, I reached out to her and she got back to me, which was great. And she said, yeah, actually, that's something I would really love to do. So we started cooking up this project together. And originally it was called Max Planck is Complicated. And I thought that might be an opportunity for you, Christina, to kind of explain to folks, who is Max Planck and in what ways is her life complicated?
Yeah, so Max is really going through it. She's 12, she's in the 7th grade, and she's dealing with every possible thing there is to deal with, from her own dental drama and trauma, to the fact that her parents aren't getting along, to the family's money problems, to her school bullies, but also her deeply abusive younger sister. And Max is not unique in any of this. All of this is really common stuff. We know that now. But what makes her situation particularly complicated is that she's completely alone in navigating it. She doesn't have any meaningful adult intervention or support, with the exception of a teacher or 2. And her parents are emotionally immature and very focused on themselves and their own survival, such that in a lot of ways, Max is a bit of an afterthought. So her life is complicated because she's having to navigate all of these difficulties on her own. And I see it as a real injustice.
Thank you. And now we did decide to call it Jawbreaker. So maybe tell folks, what does Jawbreaker refer to? What does it mean?
Yeah, Jawbreaker refers to an actual dental device. So I called it a couple of different things growing up. It was called headgear. It was called a night brace. I think that's how I typically refer to it. But it hurts, and it's designed to actually move the jaw. So Jawbreaker was the nickname she gave for it once she started wearing it and experiencing the physical aspect of having to wear that for, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 hours a day or more, actually. Yeah.
Now, I think people might be interested to know that Jawbreaker is, of course, inspired by your life, your dental drama and trauma. I love that you put those two together, because trauma, I think, underscores the deep pain of it. You know, drama can be used a little bit flippantly, but when you're dealing with something with your face in middle school, when one's face is already such a focus, I think it can be really traumatic. But it's not a memoir. Max Planck is not you, but in some ways she is like you. Do you want to tell people a little bit about what ways Max's life overlaps with yours, and what ways it doesn't?
Yeah. And so Max is like me in much the way that Max is like any adolescent, in that the only thing in the world she wants is to belong. She's 12, she's a kid, she's in middle school, she just wants to belong, she just wants to fit in. And I think she's like the childhood version of me for those reasons. Of course, she's like the childhood version of all of us for those reasons. But she's also very similar to the way I was at that time, with her inclination to hide. She uses hiding as a means to protect herself, but she's different from the adolescent version of me in that she's much braver than I was at that age. She faces her fears in a very public way. And I admire that about her. And what she winds up doing in the end is sadly not something I ever would have had the guts to do. So I think that's how we're also a bit different.
Thank you. And I know we just have about 2 minutes left, so I thought it might be good to tell people what's coming next for you. Jawbreaker is not the end of your middle grade journey, thankfully. Christina Wyman, what are you working on next?
Yeah, I am so thrilled to be working with Joy on a follow-up called Slouch. And this is about another 12-year-old girl with a very similar but different set of issues. Her body is changing, and this has meant that she's unusually tall for her age. So she's receiving a lot of unwanted attention as a result, and she's reckoning with how to create boundaries with her family and friends, and how to get the support she needs from adults. And she's also reckoning with a world that views women's and girls' bodies as public property from a very young age. So that's what's next.
And I think people might be interested to know that we're going to create a line look for Christina. This won't be a series, and that you're not going to meet the same characters book after book, but we're going to have that wonderful James Lancet cover art with a central image like you see on Jawbreaker. We're going to have some black and white line art throughout. So I think it'll be really wonderful for readers who fall in love with Jawbreaker to then be able to easily find the second book, and hopefully even more, that have the same mix of kind of heart and heartache that Christina's bringing to Jawbreaker. With that, we'll pass the mic back over to you, Elise.
Thank you. We are going to have Mary up first to preview our picture books.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christina and Joy. I really enjoyed your conversation and appreciate you joining us today. I'm going to dive right into picture books because we have a lot to cover today. And I can't, next slide, please. And I can't imagine a better book to kick off our presentations than one I have been waiting for since I started working with Carole Lindstrom in 2019. Carole has an exceptional talent for writing books that are at once informative while at the same time a stirring call to action. I'm going to let Carole Lindstrom introduce this book herself, but first, if we could scroll through 2 slides, just share a little bit of Bridget George's gorgeous, gorgeous artwork for this book that is narrated by water. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. And now Carole.
Bonjour, hello librarians and educators. My name is Carole Lindstrom, and if you know my work, you know I am extremely passionate about activism. I truly believe that all of us, including our kids, have the power to change the world. I doubt any of you need proof of that, but if you do, look no further than Autumn Peltier, the subject of my next book. Autumn Peltier, Water Warrior, is a biography of 2 incredible water and Indigenous rights activists, Autumn Peltier and Autumn's great aunt, Josephine Mandamin, lovingly known as Grandma Josephine. At the age of 8, Autumn began speaking up for what she knew was right, following her great aunt's footsteps in the ongoing effort to safeguard our water. This effort to protect Mother Earth does not begin and end with just one person. It is intergenerational, and I hope that this book, narrated by Nibby, Water, with information at the end of the book about Autumn and Grandma Josephine's life, will invite young readers to become water warriors, just like Autumn. Miigwech.
Big thank you to Carole for contributing that video for this buzz. I also wanted to let you all know that we will be hosting a Water Warriors campaign this fall, and I'm dropping a link in the chat for you to sign up to receive more information and if you're interested in learning more. Next slide, please. Sometimes I Cry, narrated by a very brave little boy, Jess Towns and Daniel Miares' Sometimes I Cry, is perfect for readers learning to cope with big emotions. Jess's verse captures the feelings, good and bad, that can move us to tears. Next slide. A favorite spread towards the end reads, "Sometimes my feelings fill me up like a water balloon that stretches and stretches and stretches until I think I might burst. But when I let my tears out, my feelings fit perfectly inside my body, all of my feelings together." I think we all know that feeling of being so full of emotion and the relief that comes with crying. And we know this gentle reminder and that it's healthy and okay to feel all of your emotions. I know this will be such a reassuring read aloud for young children. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Mole is Not Alone. You are in for such an adventure with Mole is Not Alone, another perfect book for social emotional learning. Over the course of the book, we follow Mole, who will be deeply relatable to any shy kid or introverted adult like me who has ever talked themselves into going to a gathering. Next slide. Mole is on his way to Rabbit's birthday party, but spends the trip questioning whether he's really ready to chat with all the animals, and he's gently encouraging himself along the way. Next slide. One of my favorite parts of this book is the journey. We watch Mole's progress underground as he gets closer and closer to the party. And Maya Tatsukawa has nailed the world building here. We see a bustling animal kingdom filled with loving details for readers to pore over that are juxtaposed with Mole's very interior journey. My favorite thing about this book, though, and next slide, is that the end is not what you might think. I hate when I read a book like this and it gets to the end and it's all about overcoming your fears and finding you enjoy the party after all. But really what Mole finds at the end of this journey is Skunk, who is also waiting outside the party, equally terrified to go in, and Rabbit, his friend, who is so accepting of both of their admission that they might just need to try again next time. While today wasn't the day for Skunk and Mole to party with friends, they did find community with each other. And there's such a wonderful reminder there that there is no one right way to find your people or animals. Next slide, please. Next, I want to preview 4 new picture books on a similar theme, food and family. Okra Stew, Boys Don't Fry, Lala's Dumplings, and Waiting for Tomorrow are all full of inviting, mouth-watering spreads that remind readers that in so many families, cooking is an intergenerational affair. Okra Stew follows one boy's day with his father making okra stew, rice, and cornbread. Author and illustrator Natalie Days weaves in images from the past to illustrate how Gullah Geechee culture is passed down from generation to generation. Next slide, please. You can see an example here of what I mean by weaving in images from the past. You see at once the boy with his father, and then from the past, the father with his father. I really love that. And back matter includes more information about Gullah Geechee people, cultural practices, language, a recipe for okra stew, and details the author's personal connection to the story. Next slide. In Boys Don't Fry, Jin explains that his mother always calls the kitchen the stomach of the house, and that his grandmother, who is the heart of the house, that's Mama. Unfolding on the eve of Lunar New Year, we follow Jin as he makes his case to help prepare the family feast, a task usually reserved only for women. Next slide, please. Despite his auntie's protest, his mama welcomes him into the kitchen, where she teaches him how to cook with his heart and not with his head. And you can go to the next slide. An author's note describes that Boys Don't Fry is a loving ode to the author's Peranakan Chinese heritage and a recipe for Peranakan pongte chicken. Next, we have Lau Lau's dumplings. Next slide, please. A loving ode to Millie's Lau Lau's dumplings. Millie demands dumplings from her Lau Lau, and so a day of seeking out ingredients and cooking together begins. Next slide. The spreads are so rich with detail here. They almost make me think of Lisa Brown's The Airport book. They have just so many beautiful details. So Millie and her grandmother visit Chinatown, and next slide. And I love the whimsy in the art. Oh, I'm so sorry. Go back one, Ryan. I guess I took out the whimsy page. Sorry, everyone. But in the art, you see dancing garlic chives, sweet lychee, shrimp, and of course, dumplings. And then as the book continues, we see Lau Lau hand over the tradition to Millie, who carries on making dumplings for the family. An author's note details her own family traditions. And you guessed it, there's also a recipe for dumplings. And then one more book I'd like to nod to that is a little different from the rest. Next slide, please, is Waiting for Tomorrow, a gentle sister story about passing the time with those you love while you wait for a much anticipated day. Hannah and her older sister, Hai Jin, are waiting for the family to come home waiting for their father to come home the next day and decide to make hatiak as a special treat for when he returns. Next slide, please. The day does not go as planned, but the sisters still come together to make something really special, even if it did not go as they expected. This book is inspired by a similar memory with the author's sister and beautifully illustrates the warmth found in company. And you guessed it, there's a recipe in the back of the book for hatiak. Next slide, please. Not he or she, I'm me. This celebration of self never fails to bring a smile as we follow a non-binary child throughout a normal day. Waking up, going to school, playing with friends, all punctuated throughout with a gentle affirmation of not he or she, I'm me, or not him or her, I'm them. Next slide. Written and illustrated by two creatives who themselves have joyful, fulfilling days as people outside of the gender binary, this book fills a continued gap on shelves for stories about gender non-binary characters created by gender non-binary people. And with book banning and attacks on the rise, it is more important than ever to see positive representation that is celebratory of queer existence. Next slide, please. Ordinary Days. Oh, I am next slide. Really excited about this one and all of them, of course, but Angela Joy, I think, showed last year with Choosing Brave that she has a real knack for picture book biographies. Her poetic text in Ordinary Days, the seed, sound, and city that grew Prince Rogers Nelson, takes readers on a journey with Prince from his earliest days living without comfort or ease in Minneapolis when music was just the seed of a thought in his pockets, through the years of his discovery of music when tender shoots of seed and sound broke ground, and finally as he imagines the way his music will change the world. Next slide, please. Angela's words are perfectly paired with Jacqueline Alcantara's bold and fresh illustrations, all in a hue of purple, nodding, of course, towards Purple Rain. An author's note, next slide, please. An author's note provides more detail on Prince's life and accomplishments and a playlist. Angela Joy grew up in the same Minneapolis neighborhood as Prince. She knows his favorite places, what he saw through his eyes, and even some of his childhood friends. All of this results in an honest and intimate biography about a child who would one day become an icon. Next slide, please. I'm wrapping up with two more picture books, almost on to middle grade. This is the first in a new picture book series by a favorite author, Angela Dominguez. Meet Dinosaur and Bluebird. One of these characters speaks Spanish and one speaks English, and one is a hungry dinosaur and the other is a tasty bird. You would never believe it, but they are best friends. This new series from Angela tackles toddler-friendly topics like eating, sleeping, and wanting more. The Lolo and Birdie series books will meet the ever-growing demand for bilingual titles, and there couldn't be a more kid-friendly way to help children express themselves in 2 languages. And finally, next slide, please. I'm so sorry, I skipped showing you some beautiful art. Next slide. And one more. Thank you. Finally, I'll wrap up with a picture book biography that I'm very excited to introduce during Disability Pride Month. She Kept Dancing, written by Sydney Mesher and Catherine Ladone, illustrated by Natel Queck, is a sweet and heartfelt picture book that tells the true story of Sydney Mesher, who in 2019 danced her way to the historic stage of Radio City Music Hall as the first ever Rockette with a visible disability. Next slide, please. Sydney was born with one hand, but it was her long toes that her parents noticed first. Her mom knew that she was going to be a dancer, and she was right. Growing up with a limb difference wasn't easy for Sydney, but with her family's love and support, she fostered a love of dance that would last a lifetime. There are currently very few picture books in the market starring a child with a limb difference, and with this book, Sydney hopes to continue spreading the message that all bodies are worthy of the spotlight. Next slide, please. Before we move on to middle grade, just a shout out for some popular and best-selling series continuing picture books, including Skeletina, Escargot, who's coming back for Valentine's Day, Bad Kitty. Next slide, please. We have so many other must-read picture books that you can find in our title spreadsheet. Scariest Kitten in the World, Cat Side Up, Cat Side Down, Skyscraper Babies, More Than Words, How Mr. Silver Stole the Show. Next slide, please. And even more, like Party Pooper, A Gift for Nai, a story no one has ever heard before, and To Dogs with Love. And next slide, please. Finally, I want to give a shout out to Neon Squid, which publishes some exceptional nonfiction for young readers. They have more books coming out this fall in their Young Zoologist series, A Day in the Life series, the Tales of series. We have Tales of World War II, and then the gorgeous Secrets of the Forest. If you haven't already discovered Neon Squid, please look them up. Next slide, please. All right, over to Alex.
Okay, I'm gonna jump right into our middle grade list. Next slide, please. Let's kick things off with the latest middle grade novel from beloved award-winning authors Wendy Moss and Rebecca Stead. A classic middle grade through and through, The Lost Library follows 3 characters in one small town, all mysteriously linked by an unfortunate event that happened years prior. When a mysterious little free library guarded by a large orange cat appears overnight in the small town of Martinville, 11-year-old Evan plucks 2 weathered books from its shelves, never suspecting that his life is about to change. Evan and his best friend Rafe quickly discover a link between one of the old books and a long ago event that none of the grown-ups want to talk about. The 2 boys start asking questions whose answers will transform not only their own futures, but the town itself. Told in turn by a ghost librarian named Al, a slightly curmudgeonly and very fluffy cat named Mortimer, and Evan himself, The Lost Library is a timeless story about owning your truth, choosing the life you want, and the power of a good book, and of course, the librarian who gave it to you. Next slide, please. You know Sadia Faruqi for her kid favorite Meet Jasminne series. She's incredibly talented, and we're thrilled to present her graphic novel debut, Saving Sunshine, illustrated by Shazleen Kahan, which just received its first starred review from Publishers Weekly, calling it poignant and a stirring and uplifting story of family and identity. Family trips can be wrought with sibling drama. Muslim Pakistani American twins Zara and Zishan are polar opposites, and when the tension between them bubbles over on a family vacation, they are forced to set aside their phones and embrace each other's company. Over the course of the book, we learn all of the factors that drove these twins apart over the years, making it all the sweeter when they come together. Next slide, please. It can be hard to pinpoint the ongoing damage caused by microaggressions, but Sadia's incredible writing shows how seemingly benign and yet constant these are, and the poise and fortitude it can take to not be defined by ignorance. Next slide, please. Relatable, humorous, and heart-wrenchingly honest about the hate Muslims in America face, Saving Sunshine is the story of two siblings learning how to support each other in a world that is unkind. Next slide, please. Debut author Rainey Hobson, a member of the Native Alaskan Inupiaq tribe, provides readers with Eagle Drums, a vividly written middle grade novel about the origin story behind the tradition of the messenger feast. Its first starred review from Kirkus just came in, calling it a captivating tale filled with enduring lessons about overcoming the fear of others. As his family prepares for winter, a young skilled hunter must travel up the mountain to collect obsidian, the same mountain where his two older brothers died. When he reaches the mountaintop, he is immediately confronted by a terrifying eagle god named Savik. Savik gives the boy a choice: follow me or die like your brothers. Eagle Drums is part cultural folklore, part origin myth about the messenger's feast, with unexpected lessons on the natural world, the past that shapes us, and the community that binds us. Featuring beautiful, evocative art by the author throughout, it's the story of how Inupiaq people were given the gift of music, song, dance, and everlasting tradition. Next slide, please. Catherine Applegate is always an author on a mission. I have yet to read a single one of her books that is not pitch perfect for her readers, while also managing to inspire her audience to hope for better without getting on a soapbox. Her first collaboration with Jennifer Choldenko, Dogtown, is no different. On the surface, this is a buddy story about two dogs, one real, one metal, searching for their forever home with some help from Mouse, who, yes, loves pilfering kibble, but also wants to help his friends find home. Deeper than that, though, it's a story about belonging, second chances, and seeing past differences to create a lifelong bond. Next slide, please. One thing we love about this book is the chapter length. The chapters are very short, and the book is heavily illustrated by Wallace West, making it the perfect pick for the middle grade reader gaining confidence with independent reading. And with two award-winning authors attached, you know you're in for a well-written, memorable journey. Next slide, please. Starred reviews are already rolling in for A Sky of Paper Stars. This is a heart-rendering middle grade graphic novel by Susie Yee about a girl's ill-fated wish to fit in, perfect for readers of stargazing and pashmina. It follows Yuna, a Korean-American girl who wants to fit in at her American middle school. It's relatable for anyone who's ever felt awkward or out of place, and it comes with a touch of magic. Legend says that if a person folds 1,000 paper stars, they can make a wish. So when Yuna finds her 1,000th star, she wishes to be back in Korea, where she feels like she fits in. The next morning, she learns that her Halmoni, her grandmother in Korea, has died, and she and her family must return to Korea for her funeral. Next slide, please. Yuna knows this is all her fault. As her guilt builds, her body begins to turn into paper. Yuna realizes she must undo her wish and bring Halmoni back or turn into paper forever. Next slide, please. Wholly heartbreaking and with light touches of magical realism, A Sky of Paper Stars is a captivating graphic novel about identity and family. This moving intergenerational story shows how memories and love can be passed on. Next slide, please. Next, we have two special guests. Claribel A. Ortega, author of the Pura Belpre award-winning graphic novel FRIZZY, and Jasminne Mendez, translator of RIZOS, the new Spanish language edition of FRIZZY. Here they are to tell you about RIZOS. Next slide, please. Next slide. And one more.
Hello, I'm author Claribel A. Ortega, the co-creator of FRIZZY, also known as RIZOS in Spanish, with illustrator Rose Busamra. It was important to me to publish a graphic novel like RIZOS because growing up in a Dominican household, hair was a huge deal to us, and specifically forcing our hair into styles that fit European beauty standards. Hair can be such a great starting point to talk about issues like generational trauma, anti-Blackness within Latinx communities, and learning to love ourselves for who we really are. I'm so excited for all of you to read RIZOS, the Spanish version of FRIZZY, translated by Jasminne Mendez. I hope you love it, and I hope you know all hair is good hair.
Mi nombre es Jasminne Mendez y soy la traductora de FRIZZY, o en español, soy una poeta, escritora y traductora de origen dominicano. Cuando me preguntaron si quería traducir RIZOS, al principio estaba bien nerviosa porque nunca había traducido una novela gráfica. y no sabía si en realidad lo podía hacer bien. Pero después que leí la novela, me enamoré de la protagonista Marlene y me sentí conectada a su historia y su sufrimiento, porque yo también, cuando joven, pasaba muchas horas en el salón debajo de una secadora de pelo para alisarme el cabello. Hasta que un día decidí dejarme mi pelo rizo en toda su gloria, igual como lo hace Marlene.
And thank you again to Claribel and Jasminne for contributing those videos for our preview today. Next slide, please. We would be amiss if we did not give a quick shout out to The Memory Thieves, the second book in Danielle Clayton's New York Times bestselling Marvelers series. Danielle's Marvelers series remixes the magic school genre. If you haven't read the first book, now's the perfect time to pick it up and share it before book 2 comes out in September. Inspired by folklore and mythology from around the world, the Marvelers series is an exuberant celebration of cultures, including Russian glass scrying, Caribbean steel drum hypnosis, and New Orleans voodoo. Next slide, please. We are thrilled to have a new book from award-winning author Amber McBride. In her debut middle grade novel, Gone Wolf, Amber explores Black pain, trauma, and ultimately healing through the story of what might happen if white supremacists seceded from the rest of the country. The story takes place in the future and the present. In the future, a Black girl known only as Inmate 11 is kept confined to be used as a biological match for the president's son should he fall ill. She is called a blue, the color of sadness. She lives in a small room with her dog, who is going wolf more often. He's pacing and imagining he's free. Inmate 11 wants to go wolf too. She wants to know why she feels so blue and what is beyond her small room. The second part of the book is set in the present. Imogen is a Black girl who lives outside of Washington, D.C. A pandemic has distanced her from everyone but her mother and her therapist. Imogen has intense nightmares of confinement. Her 2 older brothers used to help her, but now she's on her own until a college student helps her see the difference between being blue and sad and Black and empowered. Gone Wolf is a beautiful collage of traditional narrative fiction that blends story with history and current events, while empowering readers to remember that their voices and stories are important, especially when they feel the need to go wolf. Next slide, please. Owen Colfer can truly do anything, and look no further than Juniper's Christmas for proof. You might see this book and think, you know what it is? A Christmas book by international best-selling author Owen Colfer. But it is so much more. Juniper is a character who is easy to love. She has one goal this year: to celebrate the Santa Vigil in Cedar Park in honor of her late father. But when her mother goes missing and the park's bureaucratic director cancels the vigil, she must seek the help of the mysterious woodsman Nico to help save Christmas. With notes of Catherine Applegate's Wish Tree, this is a story about refusing to let grief diminish a belief in magic and hope, and coming together to protect family and community, making this a Christmas classic perfect for all ages and worthy of a read every year. Next slide, please. Don't forget to check out our continuing series displayed on this slide. And next slide, please. And even more incredible middle grade titles that are available on NetGalley. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And over to Elise now to talk about our YA titles.
Thank you, Alex. Let's jump right in. Okay, next slide. 3-time National Book Award finalist Steve Sheinkin has created another heart-pounding nonfiction story. Steve takes us back to World War II behind the walls of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, where a Slovakian teenage boy named Rudy is planning an escape. Rudy is hoping to sneak into Great Britain to avoid being sent to a labor camp, but is caught and sent to Auschwitz, where he discovers that the Nazis don't care if prisoners live or die. He vows to escape and report the atrocities. The book also follows Gerta, a Slovakian teenage girl who is living undercover as a Hungarian Christian with her Jewish family. Hungary hasn't started to send Jews to camps, but Gerta knows the clock is ticking. Rudy escapes Auschwitz, walking over 80 miles while starving and exhausted, and manages to find safety and alert the world in what is now known as the Auschwitz Report. The New York Times reveals the truth on a global scale, halting the transport of over 100,000 Hungarian Jews about to be sent to Auschwitz. The story matters very personally to Steve, who is Jewish and recently returned from a 6-day hike in Europe where he retraced Rudy's escape from Auschwitz to Slovakia, and it matters to readers who develop more empathy by seeing these events through the eyes of someone young. Next slide. Next up is YA debut, I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast Is Me by Jamison Shea, and I'll leave it to Jamison to tell you more. Next slide.
Hi, hello, my name is Jamison Shea, and I'm the author of I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast Is Me. It is a dark fantasy, think Black Swan meets Jennifer's Body. It tells the story of Laure, the only Black ballerina at a Paris academy, and she is lured into the catacombs on the eve of her big audition with the promise that things will change. She's at the top of her class, but it's not enough, and Laure will not go home with nothing. So she makes a deal in the depths with a talking river of blood for power so that they can't deny her. Pretty soon, people are dying. She doesn't know if what she's craving is actually her or the thing inside her that's turning her into a monster. And worse, is the world at large even worth that descent into madness? It is perfect for fans of horrible, horrible girls committing crimes, House of Hollow, and it's a villain origin story coming August 29th.
Right down my alley. Okay, next slide. Next, we have Into the Bright Open, a Secret Garden remix. This queer YA reimagining of The Secret Garden subverts the cishet and white status quo of the original in a tale of family secrets, wonderful and horrifying. This remix locates the iconic story to the Georgian Bay in a time when young women were trained to be quiet, proper, and subservient. Of the three main characters in the story, two are queer and one is indigenous. Cherie Demolin's previous YA novel, The Marrow Thieves, has garnered a mountain of praise, including the 2017 Kirkus Prize for Young Readers. She says the original Secret Garden, once you get past the racism, was always a fascinating book to her as a child. She liked the idea of another world hidden away from the everyday, so she reframed the story through the imagined experiences of her ancestors, indigenous people who settled in the Georgian Bay in the 1800s and lived separately from both their French and First Nation relatives. Though Cherie stays true to the time period of the original story in 1901, she gets her characters with the beauty of a secret place open to them and away from the hardships of their identity and existence. Next slide. This next YA graphic novel is a memoir of Brazen by author Penelope Vigue. French comics author Penelope has fully joined America's comics and graphic novel family with her hit Brazen, which serialized in the Washington Post and won her an Eisner Award. Penelope dusted off her old diaries. No, really. This book is based on her actual diaries. She found cringeworthy, hilarious, and heartbreaking stories begging to be drawn. Next slide. In Layers, Penelope reflects on her childhood and teen years with her characteristic wit and unflinching honesty. The result is 15 short stories about friendship, love, grief, and those awkward first steps toward adulthood. Next slide. Her focus is on emotional connections that come and go, most notably with pets and with her grandmother. It's something very special. Next slide. In this debut young adult speculative thriller, a teenage girl gets pulled into investigating the truth behind her new boarding school's decades-old legend. The Changing Man by Tomi Oyamakinde has asked the question, what makes you you? When a fellow urban achiever student begins acting out of character, Aoife can't help but wonder if there could be any truth to the school's decades-old legend of the Changing Man, and if there is any connection to the missing older brother of her classmate, Ben. As Aoife investigates with Ben and another student, the trio realizes that the truth behind the Changing Man is even worse than any of them could have imagined, and they might be the next victims. Just when readers think they know what's going on, the story heads in an unexpected direction that will keep them racing to the end. You'll find dark academia vibes as the story delves into the ways institutions deem some people as easily replaceable and or damaged. Next slide. This Dark Descent, steeped in Jewish folklore, the Scorpio races meets Peaky Blinders in this dual point of view YA fantasy where the daughter of a famous horse breeder, a black market enchanter, and an ambitious heir must work together to win a cutthroat magical horse race. As Damien helps Ari uncover her roots and power, they fall into a swoon-worthy will they or won't they romance that will sweep readers off their feet. Pairing the sweeping excitement and beauty of horse racing with an intricate magic system based on Jewish folklore, this Dark Descent combines competition with mythos and the start to this must-have fantasy duology. Kaylin spins an intricate web of action, secrets, and magic. It is a must-read. Next slide. New York Times bestseller Faith Erin Hicks is back with a young adult graphic novel romance about a hot-headed hockey player who asks for temper management lessons from the cool, calm, and collected boy in drama club. With multiple New York Times bestsellers and an Eisner Award and several nominations, under her belt, Faith is well-loved in the comics community. Her genius for drawing complex, endearing characters can be seen in Friends with Boys, Ride On, and Pumpkinhead. Next slide. Readers will fall in love with the bubbling romance between Alex and Ezra. Teens love romance stories, which is made obvious with all the acclaim of Heartstopper and the incoming Heartstopper 2. And this one is sure to satisfy that desire. Next slide. This is a great book for anyone who dares to challenge the status quo. Next slide. This is a debut novel, At the End of the World by Nadia McCauley, with a totally unforgettable voice that will stick with you long after the last page. Author Nadia is a bright young talent in the YA space. She hasn't even graduated from college yet, but she's doing great things. The world is about to end. In 9 months, life as we know it will be wiped out. Aisha hasn't seen her older sister June in 2 years, and it's now or never to say the things she needs to say to her. With the clock ticking, Aisha embarks on a road trip to find June, accompanied by her mother, her boyfriend Walter and his parents, and a stray cat named Fleabag. This is a powerful novel about sisterhood, friendship, first love, and the things we do and say when we know we're running out of time. Next slide. And I'm happy to introduce Hercilia Mendizabal, Spanish translator of Laurie Halse Anderson's Speak. A Spanish language edition of Speak has been a dream of Laurie's for many years. First published in 1999, Speak was a finalist for the National Book Award, has sold over 3.5 million copies, and touched, changed, and even saved countless lives. We're proud to publish this empowering story of a teenage girl's struggle to rediscover her voice after surviving rape. For the first time ever, Speak will now be available in the United States in Spanish language translation to reach an even wider audience. And I'll leave it to Hercilia to say some more to our Spanish-speaking audience. Next slide.
Gracias, Elise, por esta oportunidad de decir unas palabras acerca de Habla, un libro brillantemente escrito por Laurie Halse Anderson y que sigue tan vigente hoy como hace 20 años cuando se publicó por primera vez. Traducirlo fue un honor y fue una experiencia muy gratificante por muchísimas razones. Se me ocurre mencionar dos. Una fue mantener la voz de Melinda tan auténtica como su voz en inglés, porque tiene una mirada muy cínica, muy mordaz de su entorno, de lo que le toca vivir, que es tan duro, y eso le da un humor muy ácido a la narración, que me parece brillante. Y por otro lado, por supuesto, el hecho de que ahora esta traducción permita que muchos más lectores accedan a este libro, en este caso hispanohablantes, por supuesto, porque me parece que es una lectura con la que todos los adolescentes y no adolescentes se van a poder identificar de alguna manera u otra, y es un libro que sabemos que les ha dado voz a muchos que no se han animado a hablar, que están pasando o han pasado por situaciones similares a las de Melinda, y me da una gran alegría que ahora llegue de nuevo a un público mucho más amplio al que también le va a dar voz.
Next slide. Gorgeous Gruesome Faces is a debut YA sapphic psychological thriller that follows the disgraced teen idol who comes face to face with the demons of her past in a glittering cutthroat K-pop competition. Teens are gravitating more and more towards smart psychological thrillers, and Gorgeous Gruesome Faces combines the irresistible intrigue and can't look away tension of blockbusters like Squid Game and Yellow Jackets. This is truly a thriller to die for that will have readers at the edge of their seats. Growing up, Linda moved from Taiwan to the US to Canada, and her experiences as an immigrant have deeply influenced her work. Through her unique lens, she's done extensive research to draw inspiration from K-pop, Chinese mythology, and Japanese folktales to tell a story that highlights the diversity of East Asian representation as it relates to the Asian diaspora. Gorgeous Gruesome Faces is Linda's tribute to Asian horror and thrillers, pop idol, sapphic love, and the friendships that shape and define us. This is the first in a duology that will have readers screaming and swooning for more. Next slide. Pirates of the Caribbean meets The Mummy and Vengeance of the Pirate Queen, a beautifully designed standalone YA fantasy romance set in the world of Trisha Levenseller's daughter of the Pirate King. Book talkers and fans love Trisha's hate-to-love banter-filled relationships, and this couple has already been established as filled with the kind of antagonism and reluctant attraction that Trisha is so skilled at. Paired with this romantic tension is a grand adventure with undead pirates and magical underwater kingdoms. This is currently the last planned title in the Pirates universe, but we have more Trisha on the way. Next slide. Be sure to check out even more books from us, including those on NetGalley. Next slide. And now, next slide. For our live Q&A with Rex Ogle and illustrator Monica and Magaña with editor Brian Geffen. Doña Quixote Rise of the Night was my May staff pick, and I can't wait for the creators to tell you more about it. Brian Geffen is a senior editor at Henry Holt Books for Young Readers, an imprint of the Macmillan Children's Publishing Group. Brian acquires widely across YA, middle grade, particularly fantasy, realistic contemporary, and action adventure. Take it away, guys.
Everyone, thanks so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk with Rex and Monica about the wonderful Doña Quixote. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about them. Rey Terciero, also known as Rex Ogle, has written and edited hundreds of books and comics for children and young adults, including the best-selling graphic novel, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. He is a Latinx writer who has always been drawn to classic stories and enjoys retelling them for a contemporary audience. Born and raised mostly in Texas, Rey now lives in Los Angeles, where he writes in his spare time. That is, when he's not outdoors hiking with his dog Toby, playing Mario Kart with friends, or reading. And then Monica M. Magaña is an illustrator from Los Angeles, California, who has worked in advertisement, film, animation, and TTRPGs. She enjoys drawing fantastical characters, whimsical stories, and pushing for bold colors. With Doña Quixote being her first foray into publishing, she has found a new love in drawing comics. Monica now lives in Vancouver, British Columbia with her husband, John, drawing, drinking as much tea as possible, checking her Animal Crossing island, and playing D&D with friends. Before I sort of start the Q&A and turn it over to Rex and Monica, I just wanted to say that I am incredibly excited. This is the first of a duology, so look out for the next book next year. I'm biased as their editor, so don't take my word alone. Best-selling author Max Brallier called it, he said of it, folklore, fun, and adventure at its best. Lucia is a hero we can all relate to. So now I'm going to sort of turn it over to Rex and Monica because I'd love to hear their take, and I'm sure you all would as well. So I'm going to try and bounce around a little bit and maybe see if I can involve you both on the same questions. But Rex, we're going to start with you. The obvious question here is what inspired you to sort of write a retelling of one of the most well-known works of literature in human history? But in addition to that, I'm curious specifically why you felt like doing so for a modern young reader audience, or put another way, why do you think this story retold is relevant to a new generation?
Hi, everyone. Honestly, it was just, I grew up watching and reading all kinds of books and cartoons. And one of them that I watched when I was really young was a Spanish cartoon called Don Quixote and Sancho Panda. And it was an amazing cartoon that I just got a lot of laughs out of. And my abuela told me that it was based on a novel. And it was supposed to be the first novel in Spanish history. And I was like totally taken back. So when I was older, I remembered that. And I read Don Quixote, and it was just such a fun adventure. And I think in that, I was always thinking about Lucia and wanting to create a modern day retelling of the story that takes place in Texas about a girl who can see what no one else sees through a magic helmet.
I love that. And you have absolutely delivered. And I love sort of the balance that you brought to it of being faithful to that story, but also really kind of bringing your own spin to it. So Rex, you just told us what drew you to this project. Monica, I'm so eager to hear what drew you to this project. And also in particular, knowing this is an historical story and you kind of wanted to be faithful to that original story, but also inflect it obviously with your own modern visual feel. How did you go about kind of bringing that balance?
Hi, everybody. The thing that brought me to this project was really the relationships that Rex has written within the story between Lucia and the different family members, friendships, school bullies, and overall townspeople. It really reflected a lot of what I felt growing up in a very Mexican American mixed cultural place growing up in Los Angeles. So especially the relationship between Lucia and her family, and very much especially with her grandfather, it just resonated so deeply with how I grew up and the relationships that I had with my own family, and that really nailed the coffin for me. And trying to keep true to the stories. I mean, growing up in this culture, there's a lot of stories that we bring down with us through tradition, and our parents and our grandparents try and instill in us to keep moving forward with. And it's one of those things of like, you know, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been? And so to be able to incorporate this very historical story into a modern age, really, you know, like historical literature has always been important to me. And so I really enjoyed being able to bring that into the modern era.
I'm particularly glad that you mentioned the relationships, because I think as much as, you know, this is an amazing action adventure book, you know, Rex knows how to write an action scene and you know how to illustrate them. I think also really what draws me to this book even more than the action adventure is just the way that Lucia is such a, you know, a relatable middle school character. You know, you have friendships that she's navigating homework and balancing that with a life of, you know, taking on monsters at night. But obviously the two of you had such great collaborative sort of nature together. So I'm curious to know from both of you, because it was such a seamless partnership, if you can go into a little bit of detail about your collaboration together and the general process of working together. Maybe Rex, you can start out here.
Yeah, so I worked in comic books for a long time at DC Comics. Graphic novels have always been a love of mine. When I was younger, there weren't a lot of graphic novels, so I was reading a lot of comic books. So to see all these graphic novels coming out, especially for middle grade, is just amazing. So of course I wanted to write graphic novels, and I had this background. So I put all my love into writing this manuscript, and I put as much reference as I could in there. I took everything that I learned over the years. And it's amazing because Monica just captured everything that I wanted and knocked it out of the park.
Thanks, Rex. Yeah, I mean, for me, especially this being my very first, you know, comics project, I really had to rely on my background in storyboarding for advertisement and film as kind of like my first stepping stones of like, okay, now I'm not just working with one singular panel. I'm trying to fit in how do 6 panels work on one page. And honestly, Rex's manuscript and breakdown was absolutely the most fantastic thing to work from, because it was all so beautifully laid out for me and I could see it all as I was reading it so clearly. And I honestly didn't have to deviate hardly any, because it was just so well thought out how each panel and each page was going to be composed together. And so I'm just really happy that Rex liked it.
Good, I loved it.
I do think you're being modest, Monica. You did take the material and elevate it so much. But Rex, you are certainly the gold standard when it comes to graphic novel scripts. I kind of want to go back a little bit to the fact that this is a retelling of Don Quixote, and in particular, Rex, you know, obviously you took the main character role and gender flipped it, making, you know, having Lucia Castillo be our main character. Can you tell us a little bit about that sort of gender flipping?
It was important for me to tell a story about a young girl because there's not a lot of stories out there. As a queer Latinx myself, I have a thing for strong heroines. So I was definitely drawn to that. Also growing up, there wasn't a lot of representation in books, especially comic books. So I really wanted to make sure that I captured my background, everything that my abuela taught me, and put it into the book. I had all kinds of love for supernatural creatures growing up, especially in Mexican folklore. And so I wanted my heroine to fight those and be a powerful, empowered young girl.
She most certainly is. And I feel like she's going to be a great sort of role model for readers everywhere. I know we are sort of dwindling down, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask this final question of both of you. So when a reader closes that final page of Doña Quixote, what do you hope they'll take away from the story? Monica, why don't we start with you?
Connections. All the connections.
It's really a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I hope that readers take away love of family, a love of staying true to themselves. Lucia has a Knight's Code that she lives by. She wants to be a better person, and I think that every kid can relate to that.
It's true, and it really is such a story about family and friendship. But thank you both. Thank you, Elise. Hope you all want get a chance to take a look at Doña Quixote in the future.
Yes, thank you guys so much. It sounds like a beautiful collaboration. As a Texan, I love Texas rep. But thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to our other wonderful creators and audience for joining us today for our Fall 23 preview event. I'll pass this on to Booklist for some final notes.
Thank you so much, Christina, Joy, Rex, Monica, Brian, and the MacKids School and Library Marketing team, Alex, Elise, Mary, and Ryan, of course. We're so appreciative that you were all able to join us today. Just as a reminder, tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's video recording, presentation slides, title list, and a certificate of completion. And if you have any questions about this webinar or previous ones, please be sure to visit our website at www.booklistonline.com/webinars. And just one more thank you to the entire team. Thanks to all of our attendees for supporting these wonderful books and for your enthusiasm. And one more special thank you to our sponsor, the MacKids School and Library team. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.